This is a video all about photography burnout, and I'm sharing this now because I am a photographer that is feeling quite burnt out at the moment. And I think it would be useful to share my thoughts on burnout, especially in creative pastimes, and just let people know that I guess they're not alone in those thoughts and feelings, and it's okay to have them. I feel like this could be useful for other people to hear because I know when I first started suffering from this, it would have been useful for me to hear. So I'm just going to kind of talk. I'm not going to do any stupid edits or put any attention into that. I just want to speak freely without any kind of algorithm tricks or anything like that about this thing because I think it's a really important topic to bring up. The video will probably be full of weird cuts though because I need to gather my thoughts as I go through and just make sure that I cover everything that I want to cover. And I think I've got an idea about how to deal with burnout because I have been here before and I have dealt with it before. And maybe the feelings I've got now are actually a continuation of what I was feeling sort of 5-6 years ago when I first suffered it. I used to work in a retail environment. I was a studio photographer and I took a lot of photos of products on a white background, and just doing that day after day after day really kind of sapped my creativity, and that's when I first suffered from creative burnout. I've done a lot of work since then. I know that it's not forever, and I know that is something you can put things into place to mitigate and get past, and that's what I want to talk about. And I think as I get through the video, I'll speak about how I've dealt with it at the end, but I think social media also plays a really big role in this, and I'll touch on that a bit later on as well. And I also think it's worth mentioning it's not affecting everything. Whilst I'm not motivated at the moment to take photos, I am still motivated to make these videos, so that's why I thought I'd use this as a format to share my thoughts on this. I think it's also worth mentioning that burnout can be heavily tied to your mental state. I've not been shy about saying that I've had mental health issues in the past, and they ebb and flow as with anything else. And this is kind of a time of year that's particularly difficult for me, I'd say. So I think part of my burnout is tied to how I'm feeling generally. So some of the things that I actually do are for myself rather than for my photography, but they have that knock-on effect in making me want to pick up my camera again. And photography can be absolutely awesome for mental health, but there's also times where it's not and you just don't feel like it, and actually trying to force yourself to do it can actually make things worse. I think the key is for anyone that's sort of going through burnout or any of these similar feelings is to try and just be kind to yourself and recognize that this is a very real thing. It's a very difficult thing to go through, and it just needs time and almost like a degree of self-compassion to be able to work through it, work out what's going on, and kind of alleviate it and get back into the thing that you love doing. So what does burnout even look like? Maybe you've lost your creative passion and you're not really sure why that is. Maybe one of these resonates with you, and then once it does, you can hopefully work out what to do about it. So the first one is a loss of creative passion. You just don't feel like doing anything creative at all. There's no joy or excitement when it comes to picking up your camera and going out and making photos. And I feel like this is where I am at the moment, and it's not helped by the fact that it is bang smack in the middle of what is probably the best season of the year, autumn, and there's some spectacular things going on with the colours near to where I live, but I've just got no real interest in photographing them at the moment. I've got no motivation to go and do it. And that lack of motivation almost makes me feel guilty. I'm supposed to be a photographer. So I've got this sense of, well, questioning myself. Why aren't I going out and taking photos? Why don't I want to? What's wrong with me? And having these feelings actually kind of sends you into this negative cycle, and you just end up feeling worse and worse and worse, which is why I mentioned before about it being important to be kind to yourself. Making yourself feel guilty, making yourself feel bad about not going out and taking photos is actually going to make things a lot worse. And there could be a number of things that have led to it. Like I said, that it could be just that you're in a mental ebb at the moment. It could be down to the fact that you're doing really repetitive work and you don't feel like doing anything creative outside of that. There could be many, many reasons, and it's up to you to delve into what reason that might be. I've mentioned journaling on this channel before, and I think journaling is a really good tool to kind of get into your own head and work out actually what's going on and where that comes from. Try and be curious and ask yourself questions about why you might be feeling the way you feel. The second one probably applies more to people whose photography is their work. Are you overwhelmed by the expectations that are placed on you as a photographer? This could also be something that triggers burnout. Maybe it's expectation from clients or your employer, or maybe you've just got a pretty sizable social media following. There's almost an expectation from them for you to be constantly posting and feeding the algorithm with more and more content that your followers almost expect from you. I feel that to a degree as well. I've got a YouTube channel which is obviously about photography, and half of my brain is saying, well, you're not going out and taking any photos, so you're just being a complete fraud. So there's feelings of imposter syndrome that can tie into that as well. And then again, you get back into that guilt cycle and feeling that you should be doing different things. And the important thing is just to let it be and work out exactly where it comes from. Like I said, I think we need to try and find some sort of balance, and that can be more difficult for people than it sounds. That's what I really struggled with when I was doing all that product photography. There was no balance. The last thing I wanted to do when I got home was go out and pick up a camera. It can be a really difficult thing to achieve. So maybe you just need a break from it. Maybe you just need a little bit of time away from it to reignite that passion again. The third thing I really want to talk about is physical and mental fatigue. And this is something else I've been suffering with of late. I've just felt really tired. So the idea of getting up in the morning and going out and taking photos just doesn't compute at all, because with the dark mornings coming in, I just can't seem to wake up at the time I want to wake up. And that's probably down to everything I'm going through and my brain just needing that rest. Life is busy. It's stressful. It's hard to find the time to do photography, as I said in a video a few weeks ago. And it's hard to be creative when we're completely and utterly shattered. It's just not something that we want to do at that time. I think feelings of tiredness as well can also lead to procrastination, something I am very adept at doing. I can always find a reason not to go out the next day. Maybe I can't pick the right location, or maybe the weather's not quite as I want, when really the only reason I'm putting it off is I'm just shattered and I don't want to do it. That's the honest truth. And again, that can lead to feelings of guilt, and you get into a cycle. And again, that's why kindness can really help. If you're tired, if you're exhausted, pay attention to what your body is telling you. And the quicker you do that, I think the quicker you will come to want to get out and take photos again, I hope. So the fourth thing is, I suppose it kind of ties in with the thing I spoke to a couple of points ago, and it's a loss of connection with your photography. Again, I suffered from this a few years ago when I was just taking pictures of product all the time. I had no connection with it at all, and that lack of photographic connection can really have an impact on your feelings towards wanting to shoot. This is particularly difficult for someone who works with a camera like me. I'm a filmmaker, and I've spoke about this in videos previously about wanting to separate completely my filmmaking from my photography, which I know doesn't make sense because I am making a video of me talking about photography right now, but I've now got separate kits, one for filmmaking and one for photography, and that sort of helped in a way, but also didn't. I was trying to almost paper over cracks, but that can certainly work for other people. If you can separate your work quite clearly between work and what you love doing, I think that's an important thing to try and address, because if you don't, it just all falls under the envelope of photography. And if you're burnt out by doing it at work, you're not going to want to do it at home, like I said. I touched on this one a second ago, and I think another cause of burnout can be imposter syndrome. And the longer I do this, the more I realize that almost everyone has some degree of imposter syndrome, and you'd be so surprised how many people suffer from this. Even people at the very highest level that you think have got everything sorted, they're constantly thinking that they're going to get found out at some point. And I think when you work for yourself, as I do, that is something that's just on your mind so much of the time, and that just contributes to that mental exhaustion I spoke about earlier. This can also be fueled by comparing yourself to what other people are doing, and I think social media really inadvertently promotes this, which I'll get to a little bit later. But this can also be associated with a fear of failure, which is prevalent in a lot of creative people. That fear of failure can lead to you second guessing your skills, and it can also just make you not want to commit to what you're trying to do anyway, because if you've got a strong enough fear of failure, the easiest way to avoid that failure is to not do the thing at all. So I think imposter syndrome is an element of creative burnout, because it can, like I say, just make us not want to take photos, not make us want to make videos, or just be creative in different ways if we think we're going to fail at that thing. Another sign of burnout, I think, and this is one I've done recently, is withdrawal from the community, whether that be with creative friends, it might be online, it might be stopping talking to people that do a similar thing to what you do. I know I've definitely done this year. I've probably been more isolated in my creative work than ever this year, and that's definitely been a hindrance to my creativity and has contributed to this burnout feeling. I've noticed that I spend a lot more time on my own. I don't speak to people about creative things, and although I think I do some of my best work when I'm on my own, I think by sharing ideas, by talking through your process and your fears and your thoughts and everything else to do with photography and creativity, it can be so cathartic. And sometimes we might not even realize that we're doing it or realize how helpful it is. But to have that kind of creative community around you and being able to speak to other people about what it is you do is just so important. So if you think you may have isolated yourself from them a bit, then maybe that is a kind of signpost towards burnout, and it's something to think about getting back to. Another thing that I think could be a sign of burnout is frustrations with your gear and almost convincing yourself that new gear is something that will solve the problem. I have definitely been guilty of this and have bought new cameras to reignite my photography, and it doesn't work because, again, it is papering over the cracks. It's more of a central thing within yourself that you need to address, and the purchasing of new gear, whilst temporarily could lead to a little boost, give it a few weeks and you'll just be in the same position you were in before. So try and avoid the temptation to fix burnout with new things. Try and look a bit more internally, and it's difficult. It is really difficult, but that's where you're going to find the source and the solution to this problem, not with new things. And the final sign of potential burnout that I'm going to talk about is a desire to walk away. Have you ever felt like, well, photography isn't for me, I don't want to do this anymore, completely lost interest, might as well get rid of all my stuff, I don't want to be a photographer? I've thought that. A few weeks ago, I was seriously considering becoming a landscape gardener. I mean, if you've seen my garden, I don't show it to anyone because it's shit. But if you see my garden, you'll understand that that is not a viable career path. Your brain does weird things to you when you're not feeling yourself. And one of those things is just, let's just jack it all in and do something different. This isn't for us. And I know when I speak to myself rationally and I actually sit down and I do the journaling and stuff like that and think about it, I know that this is what fuels my fire more than anything else when I'm feeling like myself. When I'm not feeling like myself, I can't trust the things that my brain's coming up with. So although I've got that desire to walk away, I know that that's not the right thing to do. And I'll try and work past that accordingly. So the solutions, I've already probably outlined a number of them anyway, but firstly, and I know this can't be done by everyone, especially not people who rely on photography as a job, but if you can take a break away from it, just some time to, like I say, be kind to yourself, to think, to do other activities, creative activities are often best, then I do think that little break away from photography often does you the world of good. I'd say the next step on from there is to try and commit to some sort of personal projects that don't have any pressure associated with them. They don't have to be posted online. They don't have to be anything to make up part of a gallery on Instagram or part of a YouTube video. Just doing things for you and you only, and kind of exploring the things that you enjoy taking pictures of, because there's a chance you may have lost touch with that. And leading from that, maybe look to reconnect with new environments or different environments or places that you've not really explored before, obviously with your camera in hand. I think when we go to new places and we have our eyes open to different things, then that can be a really kind of decent accelerant as far as our creative fires go. Things that really helped for me before, when I've not even necessarily known I've been suffering with burnout, are little photographic trips or holidays, a few days here and there, doing nothing but walking around and pointing my camera at stuff and taking photos without the pressure of it needing to lead to anything. Those things have really got me back into it in the past, but I realised that that's really difficult when going out with a camera is maybe the last thing you think of. So maybe that's like a stage 3 kind of thing to get into. And the next one just goes back to the community thing, and it's just talk with other photographers. Obviously, I've done a lot of work with Nigel Danson before, and I've not seen him for 2 months, I think. And I went round and had a chat with him last Friday and did a bit of filming of his camper van. And I came away from that day feeling so much better. And it turns out that he kind of had similar feelings to me as well and didn't necessarily want to do certain things. He's spoken about feelings of imposter syndrome and stuff on his channel before. And just getting together and talking about things has worked wonders, I think, for both of us. And we're planning to do some more stuff together, I think, in the next few weeks. But purely for us, not work, just creatively something we want to do. Just go out and take pictures without the pressure of publication or YouTube or anything like that. And that touches on the last point, is basically doing that and reigniting that creative fire within us. And the last thing I wanted to speak about was social media. And I recognised that I was struggling at the start of this month, and as such I decided to go off Instagram for a while, just so I didn't have something else trying to get into my head. And I was doing quite well with it. I was quite happy not going on it, because if you're not going out and taking pictures and you see loads of other people doing it, which is what you basically do on Instagram, that just reiterates to you that you're not doing it. And I think it can really quickly make you feel a lot worse about yourself. And this peaked on the day I decided, for whatever reason, to go back onto it. So totally by chance, I think someone said they'd sent me a message on Instagram, so I had to go onto it to read that message. And it was the night that the aurora kicked off in the Northern Hemisphere, or the day after. And as it turns out, not only did I not want to go out and shoot it, which again, kicking myself for, felt guilty, not helping, but I couldn't go out and shoot anyway because my wife was out. I've got 2 young kids, so I had to look after them. But anyway, I went on it and I saw all these pictures from people all over the country, all over the world, people around the corner from me taking these incredible shots of the aurora. And that just made me feel a shitload worse about how I was feeling about my photography. And I already felt bad about it. But then stupidly, I've stayed on Instagram for the last week or so. And now I'm seeing all these pictures of these amazing fall colours here, there and everywhere. And I just don't want to go out and shoot them. And it just makes me feel so much worse about my photography and my ability to go out and photograph them. And I think it can be a really toxic environment when you're not feeling great about what it is you're doing. And this isn't news to anyone, I'm sure. But I think if you are feeling any of these symptoms of burnout, then coming off social media is definitely a very positive first step. And I've deleted it from my phone again now, and I will go back on it, but I need to make sure that when I go back on it, it is from a place where I'm looking to share something I've done that I think is going to be valuable to other people, much like what I do with these videos. And that needs to be my primary use case rather than looking at what everyone else is doing, because looking at what everyone else is doing isn't helping me, my burnout, or my creativity. So yeah, that's just my brief thoughts on Instagram, social media, that kind of thing. And that's it really. Sorry for the long ramble. No idea how long I've been talking, but I really hope this has helped people through what can be quite a difficult thing to navigate, especially if it's the first time that you are feeling like this. I'm not saying it's any easier the second time, but knowing what it is and where it comes from definitely helps. So I'd implore you to try and use some of those tactics, like being on your own, working it out, journaling, being kind to yourself, coming off social media, all that kind of stuff. They are definitely things that will help you to get back into a creative zone quicker than by beating yourself up all the time. So yeah, that's it really. Be kind to yourself and it'll come back.